Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. Yeah, baby. Yeah, Maximus. That's the spot. Yeah, Maximus. Give it to me, Maximus. Yeah.
What is happening? What movie did you watch here?
Aren't we watching the classic pornographic film Gladiator? Wasn't that the assignment this week?
That's a good one. Yeah,
there we go.
I look forward to your insights on that film. But in fact, what we're talking about in this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000 is the Academy Awards Best Picture winner, Gladiator. I don't think the movie that you mentioned is likely to win an Academy Award.
Maybe an AVN award, though.
Could be.
You never know.
Maybe we need to add AVN Best Picture winner to our lineup in future seasons.
Look, all I'm saying is Russell Crowe won Best Actor for Gladiator. This is probably the height of his career as an actor, and now look at the movies he's doing. He's not that far off from Gladiator at this point in time.
I still think there's a decent sized gap between what he's doing now and hardcore pornography.
A decent sized gap. You watched Gladiator too, didn't you?
Okay, let's get away from this topic. Gladiator, the film that we're talking about, starring Russell Crowe as Maximus, the general who became what is that? I don't forget the line. Is the famous line, the general who became a slave and the slave who challenged the emperor in ancient
Right, who became Rome. A hero to the people or whatever it is.
Yeah. So he becomes a slave and then is a gladiator.
Oh, general who became a slave, the slave who became a gladiator.
Right. And then the gladiator challenged the emperor. Yeah. Commodus, the emperor, played by Joaquin Phoenix, is not a very historically accurate film, but that's okay. I feel like it's not really what we're looking for here.
Of course, in Gladiator, his name was Come On This.
Oh, my God. How many of these do you have?
I had 0 going in, Josh.
Oh, wow. This is all improv. Impressive.
Yeah, I'll just rip you in whatever you give me here.
That's great. So Gladiator, in addition to its Best Picture win, was also a big box office success. And this is, one of those situations where I feel like, it's not as common where the Best Picture winner is also one of the biggest movies at the box office. It grossed $465.4 million on its budget of $103 million. So a big budget movie, but a massive take at the box office. And it was nominated for 12 total Oscars. It won 5 of those, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Russell Crowe, as you said, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound, and Best Costume Design. It was also nominated for Best Director for Ridley Scott, Best Supporting Actor for Joaquin Phoenix, who plays the Emperor Commodus, Best Original Screenplay, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Editing. So definitely like a massive force at the Oscars, which I like this movie, but it doesn't necessarily seem, when I'm watching this movie, like something that you expect to be sweeping the Oscars.
It didn't sweep, though.
Well,
it won.
It won quite a few, and it was nominated. 12 is a lot of nominations.
Yeah, it got a ton of nominations. You got Ridley Scott. You got a epic sword and sandal movie here, right? So it was definitely not my pick for Best Picture that year. You had Soderbergh competing against himself in Traffic and Erin Brockovich. I would have voted Traffic. But no one asked me, Josh, as a college student, to vote in the Oscars. But I do think that Russell Crowe was a deserving winner here, although he had a real murderer's row there. You had Javier Bardem in Before Night Falls, Tom Hanks in Castaway, Ed Harris in Pollock, and Jeffrey Rush in Quills. So that's a heavy hitting lineup right there.
Yeah, I haven't seen a few of those, but I feel like Tom Hanks in Castaway. If you're giving an award for the amount of effort that has to go in with all Tom Hanks went through. But I liked Castaway. I haven't seen it since it came out, so I can't properly judge necessarily. But I guess, Russell Crowe is good in this movie, and he gives a very good, like, blockbustery performance, delivering these lines that would become iconic. But I don't know that I really felt for Maximus in any way during this film.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you. I think to kind of support your point, he is a a brutalizing general who murders, entire cities and stuff under the rule of, the Marcus Aurelius. So it's tough to feel for a guy who's just slaughtering nations, right?
Yeah, but you're meant to, right? The whole point of the movie is not about that part, is about how he's been, broken down, and he lost his wife and he lost his son and he's out for vengeance and all this stuff. I think you're meant to empathize with him.
Well, and I think all those things that you mentioned do add up to that, because I was really feeling like, obstacle after obstacle, conflict after conflict, they really gave him the Finding Nemo treatment where they put him through everything before you finally get that release there. But no, I think Crowe is great in this movie. I mean, he's a quote rugged man's man, so I think it's all smoldering beneath, and I think he gives that to you. And I don't think Maximus breaking down and crying would have necessarily made sense. I really do think this is when he was, balling out, top of the game. I think he deserved the win here.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, like I said, I haven't seen enough of those performances to say for certain if he deserved it over those particular actors. And it's not that I think he's not good here. I just don't think that this is a part that is a showcase for acting in that way. And he does what's necessary with it, but is this like a great acting performance, or again, a movie? And Joaquin Phoenix, who I think is more entertaining, and he was nominated also, he didn't win, but he did get that nomination. Like, that character is a great villain. I mean, you really, really hate him, but I feel like there's maybe more complexity to his personality that Joaquin Phoenix brings versus Maximus.
Yeah, he's very good. He lost to Benicio del Toro in Traffic, who I think that's one of the transcendent performances of the century right there. But you're right. He is like that villain who you hate more as each scene goes on and on.
Right. And that's key to making this movie work. So it did also win 2 Golden Globes, including Best Picture Drama and the BAFTA for Best Film, and, a whole bunch of smaller awards. Certainly one of the biggest films of the year.
Second highest grossing film of the year, Josh.
There you go. And we've already talked about the highest grossing film of the year.
Gladiator.
keep going. No, that's the grossest film of the year, I think.
Oh. Different types of stabbing in that.
Yes. It was also very popular with audiences, not only in terms of the box office take, but it got an A cinema score from the audience polling service. So that's very positive response from people who go see it the opening weekend. Critics were less enthused. They were positive, but maybe in a muted way about this film. Roger Ebert kind of famously hated this movie. He gave it a thumbs down, and his guest critic, Joyce Kulhaywick, gave it a thumbs up, and they have quite the argument over it. And she, I feel like, almost overcompensates for how much he dislikes the film. Not only does she give it thumbs up, but she says it's one of the greatest films that she's ever seen, which I think is maybe a little bit of hyperbole. But
I would agree, but it did win Best Picture. So
it did.
She was on to it.
Yeah. And I mean, and she also goes on, she says, like, this is a movie that's going to be big at the Oscars. And Ebert clearly does not buy into that premise. And he talks about that it's visually murky, and he complains that the gladiating seems like pro wrestling, and he is just not at all a fan of this film.
Not a fan of power bombs and Boston crabs, I see, Mr. Ebert.
No, I don't think he is. So in his written review, he said, "A foolish choice in art direction casts a pall over Ridley Scott's Gladiator that no swordplay can cut through. The film looks muddy, fuzzy, and indistinct. Its colors are mud tones at the drab end of the palette, and it seems to have been filmed on grim and overcast days. This darkness and a lack of detail in the long shots helps obscure shabby special effects, and the characters bring no cheer. They're bitter, vengeful, depressed. This same story could have been rousing entertainment, but Gladiator lacks joy. It employs depression as a substitute for personality, and believes that if the characters are bitter and morose enough, we won't notice how dull they are."
So, yeah, he didn't like it.
Right.
Do you think the projection was off at his screening? Because that doesn't seem like it matches up with the movie I watched.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I wonder if maybe part of it is that movies have gotten so much murkier in the last 25 years that maybe we have changed our standards. But that's not something I noticed at all. And I feel like there's a lot of really bright daytime scenes. Like all the scenes in the Gladiator arena are under like full sunlight and are very easy to see. So I really don't get that either.
I think Ridley Scott, you're talking about who are the top directors who can shoot big action sequences or fight sequences, battles, whatever you want. He's got to be at the top of the list for his career, right? So I thought the rousing battle at the beginning was a good way to start. I liked the Gladiator sequences, like you said. I think the two elements that kind of maybe threw me off were some of those slow-mo shots seemed unnecessary and really just kind of broke the rhythm of the scenes. And of course, the biggest qualm from a technical standpoint is the CGI. Just that's a little wonky. It wasn't great then, and it's less great now, I feel like.
See, it's interesting because you mentioned this to me when we were talking. You had watched it and I hadn't rewatched it yet. And I assumed that would be how I would feel too. But I didn't think that at all. Like, not that these are amazing. I mean, you can definitely tell some of the CGI here, like with the Colosseum and with the crowd scenes and whatever. But I thought it looked no worse than like a modern Marvel movie.
Yeah, that's not really a high bar
but it didn't
jump over.
Yeah,
Josh.
But I'm saying it's like it doesn't look. It certainly doesn't look bad for the era, and I think it looks perfectly acceptable for now.
Yeah, I guess because he is such a artist, right? You see these beautiful shots, and then you see things that are less than. But I agree with you as far as like, hey, is this bad CGI? It's average CGI. It's just that it doesn't look as good as the real stuff that he does.
Yeah, I guess, but it never took me out of it, and I don't know that I would have even brought that up as a point if I hadn't been thinking about it because you mentioned it to me.
Well, Josh, this is why we do the podcast, because we have disagreements on these things.
Right.
If we just agreed, then and we had singularity, it would be a totally different thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that is correct. So Kenneth Turan in the Los Angeles Times was more positive, but also a bit mixed. He said, Gladiator delivers when it counts, but then and only then. Like an aging athlete who knows how to husband strength and camouflage weaknesses, it makes the most of what it does well and hopes you won't notice its limitations. With someone like Russell Crowe in the starring role, it doesn't have much to worry about. An intensely masculine actor with the ability to be as thoroughly convincing in a tailored suit as in a suit of armor here, Crowe has a patent on heroic plausibility. If Crowe is well suited to be this film's star, the same can be said for Ridley Scott as its director. From The Duelists, his 1977 debut, through classics like Alien and Blade Runner, Scott has demonstrated a wonderful gift for ambiance, for making out-of-the-ordinary worlds come alive on screen.
Yeah, Ridley's already a legend here. So I think this was like the crowning achievement for him. Josh, I feel like as a film critic, I would like to see you reprint all of Kenneth Turan's reviews, like kind of as a cover band, and you could call yourself Turan. You've
already made this joke, Jason, but I appreciate you bringing it back.
Then just cut it, Dave. Stick with the porno jokes. So, but the thing is with Ridley Scott, can we just focus on the podcast, Josh? You're going off on too many tangents here. 91, Thelma and Louise, right? And then 92, 1492, Conquest of Paradise. 96, White Squall. 97, G.I. Jane, which I like G.I. Jane, but those are probably not the high points of his career.
Yeah, that
right?
was definitely a lull for him there with those three movies.
Right. So to come back with this, and then you look at what he did after, he kind of hit a hot streak again after that.
Yeah, I mean, he was still a big deal. And I remember G.I. Jane, like I saw it in the theaters and I think I also liked it, but I mean, I don't remember a whole lot from that. But even if it wasn't a hit, it was certainly something that was talked about extensively. So, I mean, he was still like a filmmaker that people were paying attention to, even if his movies weren't as beloved and as successful for like this kind of brief period there with those few.
Right. But I think this, if you're looking at a guy who is almost a decade of like, what happened to this guy? and comes back with this is a big step
Oh
up.
yeah, absolutely. This was definitely something that put him back firmly on that A list. So finally, Manohla Dargis in LA Weekly said, Gladiator is filled with brilliant filmmaking and features outstanding performances, but it's neither profound enough nor pop enough to be great. It's mournful, serious, beautiful, and finally, pointless. Gladiator isn't an impersonal exercise. It's filled with Scott's visual flourishes and obsessions, but what's missing is his characteristic sense of urgency. The filmmaking in Gladiator is state of the art, and there are moments when it's better than that, moments of breathtaking, brutal lyricism. The story that Scott signed on to, however, is predictable, formulaic, and there are too many instances when, as with misadventures such as Legend, he seems thwarted instead of enlivened by the constraints of genre.
Interesting. Look, it's a Gladiator movie. I think we all know how it's gonna go down. As far as the urgency, I mean, I think I'm going to disagree because he was stripped of all of his power, not just as a free person. He becomes a slave. He has to kind of, as a good general does, bide his time and wait for his opportunity. So I don't know if any more urgency would have added to it. You do get that urgency at the end, right? Where they're finally enacting the plan to get back at Commodus, and Commodus is killing everyone, and you finally get there. But I think it's got to build to that.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't feel a lack of urgency. I mean, this is a long movie, and I mean, could it have been trimmed? Maybe, but I didn't necessarily think, oh, we're just treading water here at any point. You know, I mean, you have big battles at the beginning, and then you have the betrayal, and you have his wife and son being killed, and then when he's a slave, every time they put him in the gladiator arena, there's the urgency of like, don't get murdered, don't die. I mean, that's how much more urgent can it get? So yeah, I don't agree with that. And yes, the story is predictable because it's following the expected beats of a particular genre. But I was okay with that. I feel like it's a lot of what you do within that framework. And within that framework, there's some good action. There's some fun performances, memorable lines. Like it is popcorny. I feel like these both her and Ebert, who are talking about how it's like serious and depressing and mournful. Like I didn't get that at all. Like, yeah, Maximus is he's kind of depressed, but the movie didn't seem that way to me at all.
I mean, they murder his kid, crucify him or hang him. They rape his wife, hang her or crucify her. There's some depressing elements.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
Josh.
That sounds depressing, but at the same time, like, maybe that's part of the thing where I'm like, that didn't emotionally reach me in any way. And I was fine with that because this isn't a movie that I want to do that. This is a movie about like cool action where gladiators like slice each other to pieces or whatever. I didn't really have an emotional investment in Maximus's wife and son who literally have no lines.
Right. They're in that little flashback or like kind of concurrency, scene, just showing them on their nice estate where they make wine and Russell Crowe comes and shoots a good year afterwards. Right. So
yeah,
same thing, different movie. Now he's a winemaker. No, I mean, look, it's all there to, put more rocks on Maximus that he has to, break through to, get his revenge. Right.
Yeah. That is what it's for, but it's that's all it is. It's just a plot device, right? They never felt like identifiable characters that I could care that they were dead or tortured or whatever.
You heard it here first, folks. Josh is pro crucifixion for kids and raped women.
Yeah, that's not in Gladiator, is it?
That's a
one other background thing that I wanted to get into because this is crazy. Oliver Reed, who plays Proximo, the sort of gladiator promoter, I guess we could say, the
slave owner.
Yeah, that. Yeah, but he has his stable of gladiators and he puts them in fights and he takes the winnings or whatever. Veteran actor, major Hollywood star. He died in the midst of filming this movie, and so they had to kind of rewrite around him. His character was originally meant to survive the film, but instead the character gets killed. They had to use some digital doubling in order to fix that. And I think that looks fairly smooth here. But what I wanted to point out was less that, but just the insane life of Oliver Reed And the death, this is Variety in 2020 had an oral history of this film for the 20th anniversary. And Ridley Scott said about Oliver Reed, one Sunday morning, he dropped down dead in the floor of a pub. He probably had a couple of pints and said, I don't feel good, laid on the carpet and died. And David Franzoni, the screenwriter, said, he's in this bar in Valletta, and this British destroyer is anchored in the bay, and the crew comes in. He challenges the crew to some sort of drinking debauch. He drinks some, passes out, and dies. I still have his bar tab, by the way. I mean,
yeah,
come on.
He was one of those old school, roustabouts, drinking and acting and screwing and fighting, right? Hey, Josh, you know which movie should have an oral history?
Yeah, okay.
Never
we
mind.
know it. We know exactly what movie that is. So.
But I do want to say, Ridley Scott is always, he's nimble with this stuff. Like, because I remember when this story came out, he died and we had to, change and all this. And then years later, right, they made that movie and then they replaced Kevin Spacey with Christopher Plummer, and he reshot like the entire movie in 6 weeks, or at least all of Kevin Spacey's scenes. Like, he's very nimble and adept of going, okay, well, we got to do something else. Let's fix the movie. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's, and it's not even just when things go wrong, but just whatever project he takes on, he is this very focused professional. And that's why he's been able to be so prolific, even into his mid 80s and everything. And he can do good work with it. I mean, that movie where he replaced Kevin Spacey, All the Money in the World, you read about that before it came out and you're like, oh, this is a disaster. Like, maybe I understand why they decided they needed to do this, but this is not going to be good for the movie. And the movie is good. Christopher Plummer is great in it, and I think got an Oscar nomination for it. And there's no way to tell that they scrambled at the last minute to make those changes.
Man, I recently rewatched the Insider Michael Mann movie. Christopher Plummer as Mike Douglas, dude. Everyone in that movie is Russell Crowe is as Wygand, and Pacino as Lowell. Like, they're all top of their game in that movie. And this is what I mean about Russell Crowe kind of being, really at the peak of his not only Hollywood powers, but his performance powers. Like, to do Jeffrey Wygand and Maximus, there's both internalizing, but one is, kind of bullied and the other is just kind of waiting in the grass type thing. They're different performances, but both simmering below, waiting to boil over. I really think for about 5 years, he was one of the most interesting actors out there to watch.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that he's not great, but that just and that he doesn't do exactly the right thing that you want for this movie, but just that maybe this isn't that kind of movie or that kind of performance is all. I mean, I don't know. He should have won for The Insider maybe instead.
Yeah, that was a great movie. Probably underrated in the grand scheme of things, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. So I think, did we all see this in the theater? I mean, this was such a big deal, right? I know I went and saw this in the theater. Jason, did you?
I did see it in the Coliseum, Josh.
In the Roman Coliseum?
Yep, that's right.
Wow.
They showed it. And then
the Regal Colonnade out on East Street.
Right, I don't
it felt like a gladiator battle at that theater sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know.
I saw it in the theater.
Yeah. And Dave, did you also see this in theaters at the time?
At least once or twice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I think this was such I liked it. I mean, this was not a movie that was really, if it wasn't necessarily a great cinematic masterpiece, it was a movie that is it's very easy to enjoy and be entertained by, right?
It crossed over, bring your girlfriend, bring your boyfriend, bring your parents, maybe not bring your kids, but it was one of those movies that a lot of people could see with a lot of different other people, other groups, other types of people. Right?
Yeah, it has a broad appeal. Absolutely. So anything else you want to mention about the background of this, Jason?
Josh, I'm glad you asked because, yes, there is a few things I'd like to mention about the background here, Josh. So there were a number of different influences on this thing. The Jean-Léon Gérôme painting, Police Verso, showed the Roman Empire in all its glory and wickedness. That's what Ridley Scott said. And that really boosted his inspiration for this. And then certain movies he named, Josh, as inspiration. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I guess because of the kind of institutionalizing and the power over people. Mm-hmm. La Dolce Vita, you'll have to kind of tell me why that is.
Takes
And the
place in
Conformist.
Rome?
Hey, there you go. And the Conformist, which is a big, revenge hitman type movie. So I can understand.
Yeah, that's an interesting set of, if we were doing a piecing it together episode, I don't think I would pick those movies, but good for Ridley Scott for thinking out of the box there. I thought about, Jason, one of your favorites that we've covered on this show, The Robe. Because
all timer for me.
That's the era when these kinds of movies were being made. And if this had been made in that era, we would have had Jesus in here somewhere. So at least we didn't have to deal with that.
And Ridley Scott watched a lot of those sword and sandal movies, and he really did a good job of this. There's a 1958 novel by Daniel P. Mannix called Those About to Die. That was the original inspiration for the script, I think.
Right. And Commodus and Marcus Aurelius, the Richard Harris character, the emperor who dies at the beginning, those are real historical figures, but Maximus is not. And the way the story plays out is completely made up.
I don't think anyone took this as historical.
I mean,
fact.
there are definitely, looking on Letterboxd and in some negative reviews, there are complaints about this, how it's not historically accurate. But I certainly would not worry about that as a viewer for this film.
I'm glad that they're saying that as opposed to it is historical.
Right.
Accurate.
No. They're complaining that it's not. Although Commodus, I did look this up. He really was. He enjoyed going into the gladiator arena and fighting himself. Although, of course, the gladiators would basically willingly submit. But he was killed by a wrestler, not in the arena, but drowned in a bathtub or something. He had a seemingly crazy life that would itself be a movie if you stuck to the facts, but not the best guy probably in real life as well.
No. That's why John Cena had to drown him.
Yeah. We'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Gladiator. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000, we are talking about the Academy Awards Best Picture winner, Gladiator, and fun. Is fun the right word for this film?
Me and you like it. Dave is gaga over it. So maybe we go early to Dave.
Oh, yeah. Why not, Dave? Why you gave this 5 stars, right, on Letterboxd?
I sure did. Yeah. I think it deserves every one of those. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that people who aren't as hot on it probably are comparing it a little bit too much to the most beloved Sword and Sandals movies that are, the clear inspiration here. But I feel like this is for 2000 and beyond. It's the ultimate version of this kind of a movie. And everything about it, I think, is great. I really can't say anything bad about it, aside from maybe you guys were talking about it earlier in that one review, the predictability of it, because, it is well-worn territory. But other than that, though, it's so memorable. I think fun is a good word for it, even though it's pretty heavy at times. I just think it's one of the most entertaining movies of the last, 30 years.
Well, Ridley Scott, let's not forget, this dude's a blockbuster machine, right?
Yeah.
He wins awards or he's revered, but Josh, Blade Runner, Alien, they're classics, but these are Hollywood popcorn movies. These are blockbuster films, right? Thelma and Louise, that's a breakthrough like that. So I think I see him as a mainstream director, same way Spielberg wins a lot of awards, but that doesn't mean he's not doing, movies for the masses type thing.
Right. And even Spielberg does heavier, more serious. I can't imagine. I don't think Ridley Scott would make his equivalent of Schindler's List or Amistad. That stuff is too heavy. Even if he makes a historical movie like this or Black Hawk Down or whatever, it's got to have action. It's got to have suspense and excitement and popcorny type thrills.
Yeah, but you could say that Black Hawk Down and Saving Private Ryan are kind of in the same ilk.
Yeah, and I actually haven't seen Black Hawk Down, so maybe that's not fair. And I did see at least one review that compared the opening battle scene here to Saving Private Ryan. And I mean, yeah, but I feel like Saving Private Ryan and that opening battle scene is so focused on the idea of you understanding, of the audience understanding how empty and horrific and terrifying war is. And this is very violent, but at the same time, you're fuck yeah, Maximus.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, you do see how little value they put on life, with just letting the gladiators die and we salute you before we die or whatever they say. And, there's, when we think about Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, they really pointed out how little they cared about other people's lives, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. But I don't think he dwells on it in a like the emptiness of human existence kind of way or the futility of violence. It's like cool violence, right? I mean, it's always in the service of, the way the famous line of Maximus saying, "Are you not entertained?" as a way to like indict the audience. And I suppose you could argue that that could be directed at the movie's audience, but I don't think Ridley Scott is attempting to criticize the enjoyment of violence as entertainment here. I think he enjoys it himself.
Right, but he's not killing anyone on his sets like they were killing people.
No,
back
he's
then.
not literally. Yes, we will give him that. He is not literally killing anyone. Even Oliver Reed killed himself via drinking.
And even if he is criticizing the audience, which I think he might be a little bit, I think it's more just like, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. I'm going to do that for a minute, but like not really like sticking to it or anything.
Right. I mean, this isn't Funny Games. This isn't like, making you look inward and question why you enjoy depictions of violence. This is like, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Josh, you mentioned that iconic line. Don't forget the other big line, in this life or the next, I will have my vengeance, right? And what I was reading is that Crowe, we know Russell Crowe has had issues with his ego. He hated this script. He called it garbage. He would rewrite everything on the spot. He thought he was the greatest actor in the world and could even make garbage sound good, is the quote I got. But, whatever. That aside, like he was rewriting and he was like refusing even that line that I just mentioned. He didn't want to say it. So it's interesting that what you were saying, like, the car crash of production that you hear sometimes of Ridley Scott movies, that he was able to turn this out with that.
Yeah, and I think that is something that he's known for, that he, whatever came his way, like the script isn't in good shape, he made it work. The lead actor is being a prima donna and is trying to rewrite lines or ad lib lines, he made it work. Some of the great lines, there's, the Commodus line when he's screaming at his sister, played by Connie Nielsen, like, "Am I not merciful?" I think that was like a Joaquin Phoenix ad lib. So, whatever happened on set, whatever was or wasn't in the script, Ridley Scott knows how to distill all that into a great movie.
I agree. Joaquin Phoenix, man, he, I think he just keeps getting better with age, but he's such a snivelly, conniving SOB here. He's really easy to hate, and he does a good job of making you want to punch him right in his face.
Yeah. He is a great villain here. And I think from the moment he appears on screen, you're like, oh, this guy, this fucking guy. And that's exactly what you want. You know that you are going to spend 2 hours wanting Maximus to brutally murder this person. And that's what's entertaining about the movie.
You need it, right? You build to that until you finally get there. So yeah, he sucks. He's a real douche, that Commodus. But I do think they did a really good job of like kind of utilizing his sister Lucia's son against her to like kind of continue giving him the power at every single turn of this film.
Yeah, and there's that level of evil where I think you maybe for a little while think, oh, he really cares about this nephew. Like he's so sweet to him and he's trying to kind of groom him to be the heir. And then you get to the point where he's like, I'm just going to use this kid for leverage against my sister. And I would have no qualms about murdering her son if that's what's necessary to keep her in line. And it's like, oh no, we thought there was this one kind of shred of decency in him in relation to this child, but nope, it's not there.
Yeah. And also, kudos to the multiple screenwriters who are like, on top of that, let's make him always try to fuck his sister, huh?
Hey.
Let's go with that.
I did briefly think that maybe the kid was his son, but clearly that's not the case. Not only in his willingness to kill the kid, but at one point later in the film when he's threatening her, he says like, you will give me a true heir, like you will bear a son with me. And so obviously the kid is not his son, but I feel like it was kind of hinted at first.
It's a very Game of Thrones, Josh.
It is. I'm sure Game of Thrones was influenced by this.
Yeah. So talking about those screenwriters, you mentioned Franzoni, who did Amistad, which you mentioned. John Logan, one of the great screenwriters out there, The Aviator, Skyfall, Spectre. And then William Nicholson, who has 2 Oscar nods for two different movies, Josh.
Yeah, Franzoni, the original screenwriter, and then those other two, I think, brought in afterwards with Ridley Scott wanted to punch up the script or get it into better shape. And as we're saying, like how much of what any of those people wrote ended up in the film versus things that were written on the fly or ad-libbed or whatever. I mean, it's a whole mishmash of different things.
I mean, big run for Logan here, right? This is 2000, 2002. He's got, he's got The Aviator. He's really on another, big time run here, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, again, I mean, I think structurally it's solid. Like we said, it is predictable, but it works in that it follows, reliable patterns or whatever. It does have a lot of really memorable lines. Is it like great writing? Maybe not, but it is great construction. And I think, again, you got to give credit to Ridley Scott for knowing what works and what doesn't, and knowing how to put all these elements together into a movie that's going to entertain audiences and win awards.
I think you're right. I mean, this is a big production, I'm not going to go so far as to say like all the stuff we've heard about like Furiosa or Fury Road, where like nobody knows what the movie is except George Miller. But Scott is a guy who can take something unruly and really distill it down to a vision and create something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think in a way it's the opposite of that, because the reason that no one knows what's going on in those movies is because George Miller is such this like personal artistic visionary that he has like the entire movie in his head before they make it, and he knows exactly what he's doing. And I feel like Ridley Scott is more like the carpenter. He's like, here's what I got, here's how we're going to put these building blocks together, and if this building block falls apart, then I'm just going to put a different one in here. And he's not married to some deeply personal vision for his films.
I agree with you, but and it's funny you bring that up, because I think that is a good way to describe it, as like a carpenter, a craftsman, that type of a guy. We always talk about these journeyman filmmakers, but he is also an auteur, right? Like he's kind of got his foot in both of those worlds. And he was a big director of, commercials, advertising, all that stuff in England before he started making movies. And I think you see like he's able to work on deadlines and timelines and, really make sure that, hey, what's the end goal of this thing?
Right. Yeah, that's key. But I think also the reason that he's such a famous, like iconic director versus some other people that we would think of journeyman is that within that framework, he's also then able to say like, okay, well, what do I care about here? And how do I get that in the film within what I have to work with? And so that you can watch his films and see, themes and aesthetic ideas and whatever that come across, throughout the films.
Josh, what about Connie Nielsen? She makes the most of what she's got, which isn't much here. Obviously, this is a very masculine, macho film. I think we could have used a little more femininity in there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think she may be the only female character with lines in this movie. And yeah, I think she's good, and she definitely asserts herself as a performer. And they make sure to at least tell you, even if you don't always see it, that Lucilla is just as smart and just as cunning and just as ambitious as the men. And there's a line, I think, early on with Marcus Aurelius, who says to her basically like, well, if you were a son, like you'd be the emperor, obviously. But
right.
So, I mean, I think they're trying to make her more than just a love interest or this like suffering, mother who's concerned about her son or things like that. But she does end up getting, I mean, she has to have a romantic past with Maximus. She's got a dead husband. She's got her brother who's trying to fuck her. Like she's definitely defined in a way by those relationships with men.
Right. She's more ancillary than primary. Another name that came up for casting of Lucilla was Jennifer Lopez. I don't think that would have worked.
Yeah, I don't know about that either. I think Jennifer Lopez it can be good in the right role, but has very limited range, and which is like the opposite of Connie Nielsen, who's an incredibly dynamic performer in like multiple languages and all different kinds of characters. So, yeah, I'm glad that this ended up with Connie Nielsen instead.
And I agree with what you're saying. I think you needed an actor as opposed to a superstar. And I think Jennifer Lopez is kind of also too big at this point to kind of give it the kind of groundedness for that role. But other alternative casting, Jude Law as Commodus, that would have been good, I think. But I think Phoenix knocked it out of the park. And then for Maximus, Mel Gibson, maybe 5 years too late for that. Tom Cruise maybe would have gotten too big, but it would have been interesting. Also, physically, he's not as imposing as like a Russell Crowe. And then Antonio Banderas, that would have been interesting, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, I think Crowe is right. As much as I've been sort of like lukewarm on the idea of winning an Oscar for this, I think he's totally right for the role, and he does a very good job with what is called for here in this film. And he's charismatic. You are always drawn to him, and he does make you kind of root for Maximus, even though, as we pointed out, Maximus is probably not like a good person or someone who deserves to be rooted for.
And one wonders, I mean, again, this is the Roman Empire, right? They basically controlled the vast of Europe and all the way to Asia. Like, I mean, what else are you going to do? The emperor says, you're a soldier, you're a soldier. Well, you're a general, go kill these people, go kill these people. Right,
sure. But I mean, you could make a movie about a slave who's always been a slave, someone who is actually downtrodden. You can make a movie about an average person, but you are making a movie about someone who is part of this apparatus of conquering and killing and is not necessarily an inherently sympathetic kind of figure. And yet we do root for him. We do want him in part because Commodus is so much worse, is so evil, is so terrible that we want to get rid of him. And of course, the very fictionalized idea that Marcus Aurelius wants Maximus to take over so that he can return Rome to this democracy, which is not something that ever happened or ever was meant to happen. Like, then we get an extra reason to root for him.
Marcus Aurelius, played by Richard Harris, legend. The other actor I wanted to throw out there, I'm a fan of him. He didn't really have much to do, but I do think he makes the most of it, was Djimon Hounsou. I think that dude's a great actor. I like watching him.
Yeah, he is good. I mean, he's basically like Maximus's gladiator buddy here.
Yeah.
But yeah, he comes in. I mean, there's a lot of good performances here in roles that aren't particularly multidimensional. I mean, you've got Derek Jacobi.
Ralph Muller. I was going to say Ralph Muller is Hagen, the other big warrior. He's very memorable in this.
Yeah, and David Hemmings, who we talked about going all the way back to Blow Up. Right, exactly, as the kind of foppish master of ceremonies. I mean, these legendary British actors who are coming in here and doing the most with these fairly meagerly written parts.
Right. This is the Maximus show.
Yes, it is indeed. So anything else we want to say about this?
Gladiator.
Okay. Good. I mean, the action here, I think we've gone through is good, right? I mean, it's maybe choppy at times, but it's exciting.
I think so. I mean, it's Ridley Scott. If you didn't get good action, then you'd be really wondering what's going on.
I think the sequence when Maximus is set to die and he escapes, I just think that is just perfect popcorn entertainment right there.
Yeah, I mean, it is good. And there's also one thing I liked about this is that they set up this huge plan where Maximus is going to be smuggled out of the city and go find his army that's stationed somewhere nearby and bring them, 5,000 men back to take Rome. And you think, wow, that's going to be this huge action climax of the movie. And it never happens. And we get a great action climax anyway, but we get the right climax, which is him in the gladiator arena with Commodus because it's Gladiator. But I like that Ridley Scott is kind of teasing you with the idea of another ginormous battle sequence at the end that never happens.
Yeah, I mean, how much longer could you make this movie?
Well, right, that too. Yeah, it is definitely long enough. So, as is our podcast, let's rate this. So we rate this out of I don't know, five swords and or sandals,
or five Colosseum matchups.
Sure.
So I gave it 3.5. Fights in the Colosseum. It's really fun. Enjoy it. Sit down and watch it, kids.
Yeah, I'm with you. I give it also a 3.5. It is a fun blockbuster movie. I don't necessarily see it as the height of that per se, as Dave does. But I mean, it's an entertaining watch, and it was fun to revisit. And Dave, we spoiled your rating, but we can say
it's all good. I'll say it again. 5. Yeah, 5 matches in the Colosseum. Which, by the way, This movie didn't need to be longer, but I would watch 5 matches in the Coliseum.
All right. Well, you may get your chance to watch some more. We'll talk about that when we come back and get into the legacy of Gladiator. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of the year 2000, we have been talking about the Oscar Best Picture winner, Gladiator. And as I just alluded to, the biggest legacy here is Gladiator 2, finally being released, or finally being made, and is releasing in November. And a couple of returning actors, interesting to see who they have come back. Connie Nielsen is returning as Lucilla, as well as Derek Jacobi as the Senator Gracchus. And new additions to the cast include Denzel Washington and Pedro Pascal. And I kind of felt bad here because I hadn't really, I'd read about casting, but I don't think I'd paid attention to what exactly is the story here. And I was looking this up, and the story involves Lucius, the son of Connie Nielsen's character, now all grown up. And so they've cast Paul Mescal, who is, of course, a hugely popular actor right now, big, trendy star. And I really feel bad for Spencer Treat Clark, who plays the child Lucius in Gladiator, still working steadily, was not cast as his own character in this film.
I mean, I don't feel bad for him. I don't think you need to cast the kid 20 years later. I mean, look who he lost the role to. Paul Mescal's great.
Well, right. I mean, I don't think it's a reflection that Paul Mescal is bad. And I think you're right that you don't necessarily need to cast the kid 20 years later. If he had, stopped acting when he was 12 years old, I'd say, of course, we're going to recast him. But he's still very busy as an actor. Like, I'm sure he would have been eager to take this role and available and probably able to do it. But we had to go with, the sort of hot star of the moment instead.
I understand that. Look, I'm not disagreeing that you don't have a valid point. At the same time, it's not just that he's a star. Paul Mescal's a really good actor.
I'm not. So. I mean, again, no disrespect to him. He is a really good actor. I'm sure he'll do a good job here. He's charismatic. He's a star. He's great in After Sun. But I'm just saying, give a little respect to Spencer Treat Clark here.
Maybe they should have had a duel to see who. But I'm interested to see what Denzel Washington's playing. Obviously, he's as big a star as you get, great actor. But we know this time period, people were not the nicest to Black people. So I'm interested to see what character they have.
Right.
Here.
Well, I mean, we had Djimon Hounsou in the original as a sort of like an African slave.
He was a slave.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, and that may be the case there too. But as you said, the Roman Empire extended at this time well into parts of Africa. So that was within their purview. So it makes sense that those people like that would be in one of these films.
It's interesting that this was such a huge hit. They had probably talked about what's the next adventure of Maximus.
Well, Maximus doesn't have any more adventures because he's dead.
Well, isn't there that other sequel script that's floated around for years?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, you think he's dead, but I mean, they could have easily been like, no, he didn't die, right? Like, I mean, it's close to the definitive, but it's easy enough to be like, no, he survived. He's Maximus. He's the toughest guy ever, right?
Well, I think he fights his way out of hell or something like that.
Yeah, I totally forgot about this. But
I want that movie so bad.
Who? I feel like I should have looked this up beforehand because you're just reminding me of it, and it's not on like the Wikipedia page. But who wrote that? It was like a spec that someone was like, what if this is Gladiator 2? And it just made the rounds. And it is something is totally insane.
Nick Cave wrote it.
Yeah. Nick Cave. So I have this book. I bought it on my trip to Sedona. It's called Underexposed, the 50 Greatest Movies Never Made. And there's a whole chapter on Nick Cave's Gladiator 2, which I'm just learning about right now, that there's a whole chapter on it. So what I will do, Josh, is I will read that chapter out loud. No, not that. I will read it and make sure to ask me about it on our epilogue episode this season. And I'll get back
I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. I feel like that is one of these sort of legendary things. And I'm pretty sure it's not like he was hired to do it. He was just like, know what I want? Gladiator 2, where Maximus returns from hell. And like, good for him. Good for him for doing that. And I'm sure Ridley Scott's version, as we said, given his consummate professionalism, will be enjoyable, but it won't be that version.
It's going to be a different thing, Josh. a different thing altogether.
Gladiator 2 is one of just a few projects that Ridley Scott has in the works.
That's what I was going to say.
Amazing. We're really on the same page here. Like, dude is so prolific. And so he's 86 years old and he is just constantly working. It's amazing.
You were telling me the other day that you saw like an interview with him and they said something like, amazing, Martin Scorsese took 4 years to make Killers of the Flower Moon, and he was like, yeah, I made 3 movies in that time.
Right, exactly. I mean, the idea that he would never think to take that much time on one movie, because I think, in that craftsmanship mindset is like, why do you need that much time? Like, you make the movie and it's made, then you go make another one. And I love that. So, he's had tons of projects in the works over the years that don't come to fruition, but he is supposedly working on a thriller called Bomb, as well as a biopic about the Bee Gees. I mean, 2 very, very different kinds of things, but both things that I'm sure he'll do a solid job with.
Do we have another Alien movie from him, since he's kind of gone back to that a few times now?
The thing about that is
wish.
He made Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and I think he had in mind a third film with those characters and those themes, but because Alien Covenant didn't do as well at the box office, they switched gears. And there is another Alien movie coming and he's a producer on it, but he didn't direct it, and it's back to sort of the roots of the franchise rather than his weird esoteric direction that he took it. So I don't know if he's ever going to get to make his intended next Alien movie.
Right. And we talked about Ridley Scott on our Matchstick Men episode, which I chose purposely as my pick that year because I knew it was that movie. But, a prolific TV producer as well.
Yeah. He's got a bunch of Emmys for his TV producing, and he's got Oscar nominations for this, as well as Black Hawk Down and for Thelma and Louise, and just so many great movies. And you may have picked Matchstick Men by accident, but I love that one. I'm glad that we got to do an episode on it. And even recently, The Last Duel, which was didn't do as well at the box office as it should have, was a really fascinating film.
Great.
Yeah, I feel like Ridley Scott is akin to Coppola, just wants to keep editing his movies.
Maybe, yeah. Kingdom of Heaven, I think, is the one, right, where he's got the director's cut that supposedly is a vast improvement over what was released in theaters.
Yeah, well, Josh, I mentioned Joaquin Phoenix, who's just on fire right now. I loved him in Beau is Afraid. He probably I would have voted for him for Best Actor last year. I thought that's how good he was, or at least he should have been nominated. I don't remember if he was. That dude's working constantly as well at this point in time.
Yeah, I still haven't seen Beau is Afraid, which I really ought to. But he is. And I think, he's one of these actors who he's in like these big mainstream films, and he's won an Oscar for Joker, and he was nominated for this as well as for Walk the Line and The Master. But he also can cultivate this reputation as being a weirdo and doing like oddball art house projects and really walk the line, as it were, between those two things.
Hey-o.
And he can be great. I feel like he's underrated for his comedic abilities. I love him
I was just gonna say that he's so funny.
Yeah, Inherent Vice is also an underrated, I think, Paul Thomas Anderson film, and he's so amusing in that movie. And always, certainly, again, one of those actors that whatever he takes on, it's going to be like, what will he do with this? And it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, he makes big choices.
Yes.
If nothing else, you have to be like, hey, that dude's willing to take a chance, right?
Yes. Yeah. And he did recently reunite with Ridley Scott for Napoleon, which is not one of, I think, Ridley Scott's best films, but they worked together again. Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott have worked together a bunch of times after this, including on American Gangster, Body of Lies, Robin Hood, and A Good Year, as you mentioned. And, none of those movies reaching the heights of this film.
Well, we know, if you listen to me and Dave do our piecing it together trailers episode every month, I think I even suggested to Dave we have a segment called A Murder of Crows, where we talk about whatever direct-to-video movie Russell Crowe's starring in this month. And he's doing a ton of that, but I still feel like he's got a lot left in him on a mainstream level.
I heard that Land of Bad is like a sleeper of this year.
Yeah, and
everybody who actually watches it likes it.
I watched it and did not like it, but to its credit, it was not a straight-to-video film. That came out in like wide theatrical release. And he's still, even if I feel like he can only get lead roles, maybe, in those, smaller, if not straight to video, like lower budget films. But as a supporting actor, he is still in some of the, he's in superhero films. He's going to be in the Kraven the Hunter movie, which I'm sure will be a disaster, but that's a big would-be blockbuster. So I mean, he's not at the heights of his Gladiator era, but he's still doing okay.
I don't want to see him do supporting roles as like, Zeus and Thor or whatever. I want to see him do awesome supporting roles, in Michael Mann movies and Ridley Scott movies. That's what I want to see. Like, be that guy, move into that next phase.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he and Ridley Scott work really well together. So, maybe he'll be playing like the Bee Gees manager or something like that in that movie. Who knows?
Ooh, maybe the Bee Gees will cover some of the Russell Crowe songs from, 40-Foot Giant or whatever in his band.
30 Odd Foot of Grunts, his band.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Good stuff. I've not heard. Dave, have you heard any 30 Odd Foot of Grunts songs?
Can't say I have, no, but great band name.
It is indeed.
Is it?
Well, it's a memorable one at least.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have to, shout out to The Nice Guys with Ryan Gosling. Yeah. He's so good in that. I really like Darren Aronofsky's Noah, which he's great in. So I feel like he's still, he's got so many different modes he can be really good in. And, maybe he's in some of this silly trash these days, but he's still giving it his all. Like, I didn't like Land of Bad, but you can't say that Russell Crowe isn't doing everything that he can to make his character work in that film.
Right. He's not phoning it in, but, we're talking about guys with underrated comic ability. Russell Crowe's another one. He can be very, very funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's hilarious
good
in
material.
The Nice Guys. So,
yeah.
I mean, this has a huge cast. I don't know, we want to run through all of them. Connie Nielsen, as I was saying, I mean, she's got so much range, even, working in European films and American films. She's on TV in the US. She's also in superhero movies and a bunch of DC movies, and always a welcome presence on screen. Your guy, Djimon Hounsou, is in both the Marvel and DC universes.
Yeah, but in the DC universe, he's in the Shazam film. So how good is that? He's in the new Quiet Place movie, Day One. And then the documentary I watched, Last Breath, about deep sea diving. He's going to be in the narrative version of that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, he does a lot of these big action things. He's in the Rebel Moon Zack Snyder movies. He was in a Fast and Furious movie. But he does have 2 Oscar nominations, not for this, but for Blood Diamond and In America, which I know, Jason, is also one of your favorites.
Yeah, that's a great movie, and that's the one I recommend. Go watch him in America. He's great in that. An excellent film.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to mention anything else about the legacy here?
Gladiator 2 comes out in November.
Right, we said that. When does Glad He Ate Her 2 come out, though?
Right after Saving Ryan's Privates 2, Josh.
Oh, right. So. Well, on that note, that's Gladiator, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Enter the Coliseum with us online and on social media.
You can do that. We're at awesomemovieyear.com. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on the platform that should be thrown into the Coliseum and killed by a chained up tiger. I'm at Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the things. And I'm doing lots of comedy now, Josh. So come out, see a show, and follow me on Letterboxd at Go for Jason.
You can find some old stuff from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on X, Twitter, as well as on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any movie we talk about, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We'd love to know what you think about any of the movies that we cover on the show. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
I'm guessing there will be a live Gladiator 2 Piecing It Together.
I hope so. And let's get rowdy.
Yeah. Are you going to have it in an arena and give your panelists swords to fight each other with?
God, I hope so.
I have an idea, Dave, that you could do as a toga party, or, have everyone dress up as if they're in the Roman Empire.
So many things that will lead to a great podcast. So
have an orgy afterwards.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Is it Dave's pick,
Josh?
It
is Dave's pick. Dave,
Well, let's let Dave tell us then.
What'd you pick, Dave?
Wow, my pick for my season pick, I had to go with American Psycho. We can't not talk about that and do the year 2000.
So tune in next time for American Psycho.
Christian Bale. You could see him in a Gladiator movie.
Sure, why not? Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.